Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. 1972 in Vancouver, where I joined the temple. Most of the devotees, practically 99% of them, had all gone down to Seattle and Portland, Oregon, to attend these lectures. And I was left behind to man the temple. And I was told by temple president at the time that actually, since you've just joined, which probably was only a few weeks, you may misjudge his character and think of him as an ordinary human being. It's better you stay behind, don't come. So I was a little taken back by that. I wanted to go, but I couldn't go. So anyhow, they were all enjoying Srila Prabhupada's mercy, etc. And while I was there, I had a couple of experiences, one while they were gone and one when they came back. First one, I was chanting japa in the temple room and I was meditating on the Gopal Krishna picture, and Krishna came alive, so to speak. I got a great response from that. And then the second time, they all returned. But when the devotees returned, I observed their mood. They all looked different, every last one of them. And there was a lot of them that went down in a van. And it was like they were on a pilgrimage. It was like they'd gone to some super duper place and they'd all come back refreshed and lighter. And it was wonderful to see them like that. They looked completely different. So I observed that. And then shortly, a few days after that, I was in the ashram. I was a brahmachari, staunch brahmachari for about 72, 73, 74, 75, all those years. And I was doing puja in my room to an ancient picture of Srila Prabhupada, well, not ancient, but an older picture of Prabhupada in the 60s. And while I was doing the puja, offering obeisances and this and that, just simple meditation, he came out of the photograph. He literally, the picture was not flat, it became like three-dimensional practically. And then tears came down his eyes. And he started to talk to me. And I was really, phew. And he communicated in a telepathic way to say, you're my son, and I'm giving you compassion. That was the first time, 1972. The next incident, which was also really wonderful, because Prabhupada came to America, in North America, many, many times during the next years, right up until 75. He was always all over the place, but he came, and I was busy distributing books with the Vancouver Traveling Sankirtan, and then I moved on to the BBT. I worked with the Airport Sankirtan Party with Tripurari. And then in any case, I was in New Vrindavan taking a little bit of, we were with Dharamatma Prabhu. We took a little break there for Janmashtami, just prior to that. And I heard that George Harrison had got the estate, the manor. So I called my parents. I was a brahmachari, I had no money, so they sent me a ticket. So George Harrison had acquired the property, the manor. It was called Piggott's Manor at the time. So that was earlier on in 73, and by August 73 I'd acquired the ticket to go to England. And my mother took me to the manor directly from the airport. We stopped in Radlett to pick up some flowers, roses, and I wanted to offer Srila Prabhupada some flowers. So I came there, and it was right in the middle of the previous day. They had just installed the deities of Radha, Gokul and Nanda. And so I immediately found out where the sewing room was, and I had my mother get the needle and the thread, and we made the beautiful garland for Srila Prabhupada. And just as we finished making this beautiful garland that we'd made from fresh roses, Srila Prabhupada appeared on the landing, and I was already down near the temple room. And I distinctly remember, and I can never forget it for the rest of my life, how he floated down the staircase. And then when he entered the temple room, after I offered my obeisances, I observed he was actually floating. I mean, this is just not a description, but also, and more significant, and I wasn't trying to see something that I didn't see, He was glowing. His entire body had the most munificent, just brilliant golden aura all around his body. It was just amazing. And I was privileged to have seen that. And he floated to the deities and offered his obeisances, and then floated back and went on the Vyasa-san. And then the kirtan began. And that was absolutely stunning. It was stunning. Then, like a flash, it was taken away from me. And I never ever saw it again. And many times later, I saw Srila Prabhupada in different places at different occasions, and I never saw that majestic, that beautiful angelic glow, halo. I never saw it again, and because it makes me think maybe we're just privileged sometimes to see things like that.
Good. Okay, hold on. We're going to ask Prabhupada any questions, or?
Yes, I have asked Prabhupada some questions.
Tell me about those.
But they'll be out of sync, so I can just tell them.
Okay.
Tell you.
Go ahead.
It was in Johannesburg, because I was assisting Srila Prabhupada. We'll come to that in a minute. But in any case, in a quiet moment in his room, I went in there alone, because I wanted to speak to him privately. And I did ask him, that it seems that some of your disciples, they're not following properly, and in the scriptures it's stated that if we should really serve by being the servant of the servant. It's mentioned in the Padma Purana. But by doing that, being the servant of the servant, then how can we get confidence in our elder, senior God brothers if they're not following or chanting or whatever? And he went very quiet, and he looked at me. First of all, I had a tape recorder, and the tape recorder was goofing up left, right, and center, but Krishna wouldn't allow it to be recorded. And although I could get bits and pieces of it later, but it just goofed up. But in any case, he looked at me. And when he looked at me, because it was, in effect, it was a bit of a complaint, which I felt very ashamed to come at that time. I felt very ashamed to even approach him with such a question. And he looked at me, and it went right through me, his look. It penetrated me like a train going through a tunnel, as if he could see my entire history. I'd put my foot in it, but I also felt the ramifications of that question. And then, obviously it was an awkward question, but he did answer eventually. And then he told me, he said, "So you are following?" I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." And then he said, "You follow Krishna. Even I may be, but you follow Krishna, then you have no problems." And then he got a little, awkward, and he had to go to the bathroom to relieve himself, and he came back. But then I also felt really bad. I regretted it.
So what did you learn from that?
Well,
his instruction.
I mean, we should look at ourselves first.
What I learned from that was.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, what I've learned from that really is that we should look at ourselves. We should not criticize other people. We may go through much more trauma than anybody else is going through in our life. If you do criticize somebody, it should be very, very constructive to help the person get through their difficulties and give them a good association. So, there are times, place, and circumstances to help somebody. But simply to criticize is not good, for the sake of it.
Good. All right, keep your attention over here. Please stand by.
So he mentioned the
Hold on.
Bhaktivedanta Mana thing.
And next.
Right. Next was quite some time went by, and here in Mayapur, I came on the big flight with all the American devotees that year in February, March, for the Gaur Purnima festival. And that year, I was with the BBT Airport Sankirtan party with my godbrothers, Tripurari, Pragosh, Kavichandra, Vaishasika, Kanapati, many of us were there. And we were given special services to Srila Prabhupada as a little reward for book distribution that we were doing in America. So one day Pragosh came to me and he said, Riddha Prabhu, you will be Srila Prabhupada's security guard tonight. I said, thank you. And you will not sleep and you will stay up all night until the morning program and take care of Prabhupada. So 9 o'clock, I went up there. 10 o'clock came, everybody went to rest, and those days we had many life members that would come and take rest in that building, in the Lotus building at the rear of where Srila Prabhupada. They used to have because there were not many buildings in those days. So they'd come with their bedroll. It was like you could buckle it up and travel with it. It was a traveling bedroll. So they were sleeping on the back, and Prabhupada went to his room, and maybe by 11 o'clock or later he was resting. Whole and just 12 o'clock at night, 1:30, 1 o'clock, I can't quite remember, he appeared. I couldn't understand why he'd go to bed at 11 and he'd be up. He'd be up by it was at least 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe 12:30. So he came out of his room, I offered my dandavats, and then he turned around, and he went to the bathroom, he came out very quickly, and then he walked to the rear of the veranda, and he looked at the yoga pit in that direction. And there was a full moon. And the wind was blowing nicely, and then he came back after taking a little stroll, and he asked me my name. He was very personal about it, and then he went in his room and he started doing translation work. So there we are. We know his schedule. It was very rigid. That's what he did. So I was there. I was watching his room and everything, and then we could hear these Marwari businessmen, probably Marwari or Bengali, but most likely Marwari because they were the main contributors at the time. And you could hear them snoring. And some light and some stronger, then they got aggressive in the snoring. So Srila Prabhupada, you could hear them, you could hear it. And Prabhupada called me. So I went in and he said, stop that. Stop that, I'm translating, please stop. So I had to go around the back and wake up the guy that was snoring and tell him that Srila Prabhupada, he needs to be quiet because he's translating. Please do not snore. It was a bit funny. Anyhow, so we got through that, and then, went through the night. So that's one little service that I did for Prabhupada personally.
Okay. I'm not sure that... Please stand by. And... action.
As you know, Srila Prabhupada came to South Africa, and he had gone through a lot of trials and tribulations to get permission to come there over many years. As South Africa was a fascist regime, and it took us 2 years to acquire permission for him to get a visa, and even then we needed permission from the Indian government, who didn't recognize South Africa. So finally he came, and I was selected as the person to take care of his arrival, and I was there every day at Prabhupada's side, and it was most amazing. And the first morning after he arrived, because he arrived in the evening, he went on a morning walk. And I was observing, Srila Prabhupada was striding down the Indian Ocean beach. Pastor Krishna was there was just a couple of us, and Prabhupada was striding and striding with his walking stick, and we couldn't catch up with him. I couldn't figure out why. I was a young man, he was an old man, and yet he had these strides that were just athletic. In any case, we got up the beach, maybe half a mile up the beach, going north, and Prabhupada stopped. And then he looked down. And in the sand, embedded in the sand, was the most beautiful image of Lord Shiva. And he acknowledged the picture, and it was almost as if the tide had washed that picture up, because it was perfectly intact. But where had it come from? Who had put it there? Who knew that Srila Prabhupada was going to be there? It was no coincidence. It was like 1 in a million chances that Srila Prabhupada would see that. But in any case, I took it as an auspicious sign that Srila Prabhupada was being blessed by a great Vaishnava, Lord Shiva. And Prabhupada humbly acknowledged and really didn't make a big thing of it, and then moved on, and then gradually we went to the car and he went back to the temple.
Okay, and what do you take from that?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's a subtle experience, and you can take what you want out of it. You know, you can say that, you know, Lord Shiva is coming to the feet of a pure devotee of the Lord. This is 1 in a million chances of that happening. I had never seen a picture of Lord Shiva, and I'd been on that beach numerous times, and I had never seen such a thing like that happen. So I conclude that it was, you know, the demigod. Of course, what Prabhupada saw and what we saw may be two different things. We also have to accept that.
Good. If you've ever seen the DVDs that I have, I usually have one devotee, then another devotee, and then another devotee, and then you come again, and then you're separated in time and space on the DVD by 3 or 4 devotees.
Okay, fine. So that's good. Then it flows better.
Yeah. And action.
So Prabhupada had been in South Africa, fired up, preaching for a 10-day period, 1-week period in Natal, in Durban, Pietermaritzburg. He'd been really, really fired up and enthused. So the next part 2 of the journey was he would fly on South African Airways to Johannesburg. And he comes off the aircraft with Pusta Krishna Swami, and he comes into the arrival lounge, domestic arrivals. And we were throwing flower petals. There were some people we never even knew, some hippies that were doing dandabats to Prabhupada. They had known about Prabhupada's teachings. They had got the books in Cape Town, and they heard Prabhupada was coming, and they appeared out the woodwork. And they were just in awe of Srila Prabhupada. In any case, we'd arranged for a yellow Mercedes saloon car for Prabhupada to be waiting outside. And the flower petals were coming out, and Prabhupada looked regal. He looked like an emperor. And Johannesburg is more relaxed than Natal, where racism is a bit more rife. So this South African police officer who was standing outside on the forecourt there on the arrivals, he saw Srila Prabhupada and he saw the car, so he opened the door for Srila Prabhupada and he saluted Srila Prabhupada. And I was really taken back when I saw that. I thought, wow, only this could happen in a Johannesburg scenario. And that guy got blessed. He did some service. He was obviously an Afrikaner, you know, from the regime, but he knew something special was coming down.
Great.
So,
and hold on, and action.
This next scenario took place in the ISKCON Center in Calcutta, 3C Albert Road, near Kamek Street, near Park Street, in the downtown area. We had a humble temple, and Srila Prabhupada had his quarters in the corner there, off the veranda, off the temple room. And I believe it was after the Mayapur festival, around about 1975. And Yadubara Prabhu had brought these Fairchild projectors. They were the latest rave in America, with the briefcase, and you'd flip them up and you could put a cassette in and play the film. You didn't have to have a, 8mm projector lugging around and all that. You could do it like a portable laptop practically. It's a new invention in those days. He'd brought umpteen of them eventually, I don't know. But he had this one set up, and he had this film called As Brilliant as the Sun, a BBT film. So Prabhupada was excited about that, it's evident. So he came out of the room, and we were thinking, you know, Vyasa-san, big episode. No. You know, they got a marble floor, just a mat on the floor, just not even a cushion. Prabhupada sits on the floor. Now, Calcutta is his spot. That's where he's from. He was so relaxed. He just sat down and he had all his friends there. There were not many devotees around. There was Shadabhara, myself, and maybe a few others. He was so relaxed. I couldn't believe it. Prabhupada was just really, really, really relaxed. He wanted to see the film. So he sat there, you know, in his lungi and cross-legged, and then he had these friends who had long matted hair down to the floor. But these guys were like yogis, and they were clean, really clean. But they were obviously, you know, old-bodied people. They knew Srila Prabhupada. They were his friends. So Yadabhara switched the thing on. Fairchild projector, and the film went on, and Prabhupada was like a little child. He loved it. I mean, you know, of course he loved his books and the promotion of his books, but that I'd never seen him get all excited like that. He was elated. And I'd never seen such people around Srila Prabhupada either. He must have known some pretty far out people in Calcutta.
Good.
Yeah. You know, this was going on for some time. Prabhupada used to always...
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Story?
Telling story.
Tell me.
Yeah, you know, Prabhupada was always communicating with Pusta Krishna, who became Prabhupada's permanent secretary during the period in South Africa onwards, and a personal associate to speak of. And he used to ask Pusta Krishna, whenever I travel around in India, my disciples don't arrange for a car for me, I have to loan a vehicle from life members, patrons, whatever, you'll get me a car. So when I was there in South Africa, I went with Pusta Krishna to the Mercedes-Benz dealership. We ordered a nice, beautiful car for Srila Prabhupada, which was delivered to us in West Germany in the Mercedes-Benz factory. Brand new. We'd paid for it from funds from the small center that we had. So he took it very seriously. And so we, you know, that year, 1976, you know, we went to West Germany to the factory. As we arrived, the car rolled off, just rolled off. You know how they have conveyor belts for. So the man says, "You've just come," and the car has just come. So then we went to a supermarket, loaded the car up with supplies for the journey, and we took off to Mayapur. It was a grueling journey, but it was a service to Srila Prabhupada. And it took 10 days, 7,000 miles we covered, and there was Ishwara, myself, and Pusta Krishna. We took turns in driving alternatively. We more or less got through Europe quite quick. Within 3 days, we were in Turkey. Took another 2 or 3 days to get up to Iran, near the border, eastern Turkey. And we were high up in the eastern Turkey mountains, and the diesel engine froze. It was like 30 below or worse. We were on a mountaintop, frozen. Nobody around, only Krishna. So after about an hour, some locals came, and Pusta Krishna didn't want to get involved with them. I said, we have to. Otherwise we're going to die. Our heater didn't work, couldn't start the engine. It was, eyelashes were stuck together. In the nostrils there was icicles. In my breath there was icicles. It was really cold. You had to jump up and down just to get your circulation going. So we negotiated with these people and figured how much we'd pay them, and they put a chain, even though they couldn't speak English, put a chain on, they towed us into Erzurum. Next morning it was all thawed out, and then we're on our way to Iran. And then after a few days we got to Afghanistan. Through Afghanistan we came to Pakistan, which was a lot warmer, And we drove up to the Indian border and sailed in. And we went to the Delhi temple, chilled out there for a day, took a bath, and then went on via Varanasi and Prayag and Calcutta. And then went straight up to Mayapur via Bhaktisiddhanta Road, and we'd purchased a beautiful bouquet of flowers for Srila Prabhupada, as well as the car, and we'd put white cover seats and all, made it like a presentation for Srila Prabhupada from the South African Yatra. So we went into the room where he was there in the Lotus building, and Prabhupada was very grateful that we'd made this very dangerous journey. Gave him the flowers. He immediately said, "Give to the deities. This is not for me." And he said for the car, he instructed the devotees to immediately make a garage. So we sat there, and while we were there, I think it's Adhikeshava Swami came with a whole stack of traveler's checks, $100 bill, $100 denomination traveler's checks, $10,000, and he was saying, "Oh, my father is the president of Bank of America in New York," and he was trying to impress Srila Prabhupada with the money, and Prabhupada was not impressed. I remember that. Prabhupada just said, "BBT." Prabhupada did not get attached to opulence. And he was trying to impress Prabhupada about this for some reason. I got this idea. Prabhupada was not impressed. But I think he really appreciated that car. He liked that.
Okay. Ask everybody. So all the times you were with Prabhupada, what quality did he manifest that is forefront in your mind or your consciousness about his quality, that what makes him a unique, pure devotee?
Big question. I mean, Srila Prabhupada was always trying to engage us no matter what, even though we made mistakes. I can remember so many times when I was trying to escort Srila Prabhupada to the bathroom after he'd given a fiery lecture on the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We were petrified that he was roaring like a lion. He was saying things that could have got him and us in jail that night. He was so uncompromising, he was fierce, he was like, nobody could stop Srila Prabhupada because he knew how to be revolutionary according to time, place and circumstance, whereas we were like fanatical. You know, Prabhupada absolutely knew how to engage a revolution in consciousness. He knew how to do it. And one time after the lecture, you know, like a fool, I wanted to take him off the stage through the audience, the long way around the foyer so he could see the book distribution that I was setting up. People were buying the books like anything. He saw that and he said, "Oh, we're selling so many books." And he was impressed. And then we got to the bathroom the long way around and he said, "But, oh, the bathroom." But all the time when he was on the stage, he was telling me the bathroom's there on the wings of the stage. So I was like a fool trying to get, you know, trying to treat him like a servant, you know. So still he didn't chastise me. He was humble enough, you know, to follow me and come the long way around and see the books, which I wanted him to see, but I'd put pressure on him. He wanted to go to the bathroom. I felt like a right idiot. Not all the time.
So what does that tell you about his quality?
Well, meek, humble, he could...
So say, what I learned from
okay.
what I learned from that was?
What I learned from that experience was that I should be, you know, more of a servant. I should be more attentive to his instruction, even though he's showing by his gesture where to go. I should be very careful and not be presumptuous. So I did learn something from that. And there's a few things, you know, as I've told previously, there's a few things that I learned from.
So what did that teach you about Prabhupada, that he went along with your...
Well, he was tolerant. Srila Prabhupada was tolerant of...
Sorry, I'm talking and go.
Srila Prabhupada was tolerant. He knew that we would make mistakes. He knew that. And he knew that we would goof up from time to time, and he would accept that. And that's a really good quality. He could see that, you know, we have to forgive and try and get over that, and they're learning, and they're my students, and that's how they learn. But in any case, the experience of being around him for 21 days, every day, was absolutely amazing. I shall never forget that, and that's highlighted in my book. You could read it, you know, I've given you the copy. And that experience of being with him continually, you know, for 21 days, 19 days or something, you know, it's something I should never forget, ever. I did some regression not long ago. I couldn't go back to my previous life. I went immediately back to that time, and I just cried. I cried for hours on end, and I was in that mood for weeks afterwards. I was just, you know, taken back in time as the most important time in my entire life. And when I think of that time with him, although being in separation sometimes is more potent, we can grow better. When I think of that time, it was like, it wasn't like normal time. It was like being with him and going on Sankirtan with him, and his book's flying out, and we're getting the Vyasa-san and taking it here and taking it there, and we're setting up the book stand, and he's giving the lectures. It was like another world, totally a different dimension. It may have been on another planet, for all I know. It wasn't normal. Hare Krishna.